All right, welcome back. We're getting closer to the end of the horizontal stabilizer. As you see, I've got the skins sitting in the cradles. Um, the cradles, they don't have to be exact. In fact, the instructions tell you, don't worry about making them exactly to the shape of the stabilizer. They just have to be, in general, in the right shape. They're not there to provide any kind of structural support or to ensure the shape of your horizontal stabilizer. They're just there simply to hold it upright so it's a little easier to work on. So basically all I did is cut them out in a general form they need to be, and then took some duct tape to protect the surface so it doesn't scratch up the stabilizer skins too much. And that's all you really need to do. In fact, the duct tape worked just fine, didn't scratch anything, and was very easy to obviously apply and didn't have to worry about it. I've seen people use carpet and other things, but you don't really need to do any of that. So here I'm putting the nose ribs into the skins. Obviously, you won't have access to them once you put the spar and the rest of the frame assembly in there. So the instructions have you install the nose ribs directly to the skins first. And then once you drop the rest of the structure in, you'll eventually blind rivet the spar to the front ribs. So it works out pretty well, and it's fairly simple. One of the things that I came across is the holes that go along the forward end as it starts to curve around the forward end of the leading edge. Those are a little more difficult to rivet. It is just an odd angle, and doing this by myself, it just made for a difficult. So I ended up having to drill a couple out. They didn't quite sit just right. But one of the things I did get is what you saw me attaching there and is now on my rivet gun is what I call the mushroom head rivet. It's a wider face, and it's got a rubber seal around it that helps hold it in place, and it's on a swivel. So if you don't have one of these, I highly recommend it. It definitely made this a lot easier. What I had before was basically just a straight rod type rivet accessory, or flathead type rivet for the flush mounted rivets, and it bounces everywhere and nothing holds it in place. And if you're not holding it at the right angle, it'll travel really easily. So I got this, and it just makes life so much easier. The swivel makes it so you don't have to worry about hitting it dead on, and then the rubber helps keep it from walking. So it definitely helps a lot. But even still, when you're working on a curved piece like this around the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer, it still is a difficulty making sure you have it on there correctly, and that you're riveting. The rivet gun doesn't travel, just simply because there's not nearly as much surface area for the rubber to hold on to. So anyway, get along with it, and finish getting the nose ribs into the skins, and finally get the frame into the skins. And as I said in the last video, it took me several attempts to try to get it in place and get it to sit correctly. The skins just wouldn't sit inside the dimpled holes on the framework in the way I'd like it. So it took me a few tries to pull the frame out, looked at the countersinks on there, and along the spar, the forward spar. A lot of those holes on the flanges of the forward spar are countersunk instead of just dimpled. And ended up having, like I said in the last video, ended up having to countersink a little bit more than I typically would, just to get it to sit correctly. Like I said before, the flanges on the spar may have been just off a little bit, and so it just wasn't the skins just didn't want to sit on there. I'm not sure, but it did take me a few tries to get it in there, but I ended up getting it finally. So as you can see, the frame there, it's the whole thing is about 10 feet long, the horizontal stabilizer, and so just to make things easy, you clamp the stands, the wood stands, or you clamp them to the table just to hold it in place, so it doesn't tip over and doesn't the skins don't walk on you as you're working on everything. So you clamp everything down to the table, makes it a lot easier to rivet, and holds everything in place for you. And then as you put the frame into the skins for the first time, you're going to have to obviously move the skins a little bit in and out towards the center just to get it to sit correctly. And then you look to make sure that the nose ribs line up with their respective holes on the forward spar. So that's kind of all the stuff that you use to line it up and make sure everything's good. And then obviously the ribs on the outer end, the end cap rib and the inner rib, you use those obviously to make sure it's all lined up as well. So there's a number of things to look at just to make sure it's sitting in there correctly, and that can lead to problems if you're slightly off there. And that was part of my issue the first attempt, but after that I was able to get through, and it was obviously just the dimples were not sitting correctly after the second and third attempt. So boy, looking at my garage, obviously need to clean my garage a little more, make a little more room as I'm building more on this. I am building this out of my garage, as you can see. Obviously, it's so far has not been any real issues. Everything's small enough and able to put everything on racks and hanging up from the shelf that's out of view from the camera. It's actually just below where the camera's mounted. All the big skins are hung up with clamps from a shelving system that I have, just to keep everything off the ground, so it minimizes any accidents or anyone accidentally stepping on them, that kind of thing. But there's really no need to have anything larger. I've seen videos of people with a single car garage that building whatever model of vans, aircraft out of even houses, basements, and people have removed windows from a basement floor to pull the frame that they'd built out. People are pretty good at finding the space. So if you have a larger garage, it definitely helps, but it's shouldn't be anything to prevent you from starting. If that's what you're worried about, and you've been thinking about building an airplane, but you're worried about having a single car garage, don't worry about it. You got plenty of room. You may have to come, get a little tricky with how you store things, but ultimately it works just fine. So here's the first attempt at putting the structure into the skins. As you can see, just moving the skins along just to try to line everything up, and go through and trying to make sure everything's fitting correcly. And then I'll start clecoing, and I used every single 3/30 seconds cleco that I have, and it's a lot. Like I said, I wanted to make sure it was all lined up, and I was having issues, so I just decided to force it by clecoing every single hole. And here you see me starting at the one end and work your way down. And if I recall correctly, the instructions tell you to work from to work from a certain end and go down, and it gives you a certain order when you're riveting it. I believe, if I recall correctly, you start with the forward spar and you rivet that from a point and you rivet out, and then you rivet up along the ribs. But like I said, here I fast forward. You don't want to see me 5 minutes worth of riveting, even sped up. It was 5 minutes. It's a lot, or clecoing. I'm sorry. It was a lot of clecos. Like I said, as you can see here, I have a lot of clecos here, and it was as I get everything together and I started riveting. Even as I'm riveting, as I took a cleco out, I'd put it in the other side skin in a hole that was vacant, just so every hole was holding the skin as tightly as it could to the frame, and trying to get rid of the gaps that I'd spoken to in the last video. And ultimately, after between getting the countersinking a little bit deeper than normal and using every bit of clecos that I have, it came out pretty well. I'm pleased with the way that it came out. So anyway, so the rest of this video is just going to be starting to get everything looked at, and trying to make sure that it's lined up, and start looking at all the gaps just to see how everything's sitting in there. And like I said, it took me a few attempts at getting everything lined up just right, but ultimately it worked out really well. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this video run out, and the next video will hopefully fast forward a little bit and be riveting the skins to the framework. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time around.